Welcome to Goliath, Elevate Inquiry Elements. Today we are going to talk about two new exciting features, Format Query and Query Explorer. I can't wait to show you, so let's get started. We'll begin with Format Query. For times when you inherit, create, or review a query that is too complex to digest, it is helpful if the query follows a standard syntax format. This helps the eyes sift through information to quickly identify key components. Because not all queries will be in this format, users want an easy solution to transform their query. Existing options include manually editing the query. So let's take a look at the option to manually adjust the query to make it more readable. You might find yourself in a situation that you're handed down or inherited a query that you're not really familiar with. And if you could see in this example here, like there's just a wall of text and it's a blob and it's really hard to see what's going on here. So the very first thing we would want to do is try to bring some kind of structure to it. So I can manually do it by identifying like sections for select and selections for from. I know that it's going to come from tables, what columns are being used. And so this visualization helps me see that. But even then here, I'm starting to run into some issues where we see that there's this subquery where we need to add some indentation. And so me not really being familiar with this query, prone to make mistakes here. So let me continue. We still see that there's a lot of additional changes and adjustments to be made. And it's just taken time away from me being able to do anything else. So it's getting a little bit better here. I'm starting to get a feel for what components this query does, but you see that it's still taking up my time. And it's possible that I might have made a mistake along the way. And even adjusting, I'm not conforming to a single type of syntax. Some things are indented on a new line and others are not. So I'd have to go back and review it. But at least this gives me a better understanding or a better visualization of the query, but it's not ideal. Another option is to use a third-party tool, but this also has issues, specifically with the user having to cut and paste between applications. The user wants a solution that stays within the application. We are ready for Format Query. It's a feature that quickly beautifies and structures your query. It includes quick access to the menu, results that display within the editor, a customized engine that formats content based on the BigQuery standard SQL syntax. It transforms queries into a consistent, readable format. It's expandable with updates to include different format options. Let's take a look at Format Query in Goliath. What we have here is our original query in its initial structure, and again, it's a wall of text and makes it harder for us to digest. What we want to do is apply some syntax and structure to it that makes it easier for us to understand the query. In Goliath, we can do this by clicking on Editor and selecting Format Query. It quickly transforms the structure into something making it easier for us to digest. Some of the basic syntax that it does is we have keywords such as select and from. Each one of these are on a new line without indentation. And if there's a subquery or existing indentation, we honor that. Any subsequent item is on a new line with indentation, so you could see that carried over into the structure for other keywords too. So we get a result quick, and there's a lot of benefit for us to now start working with this query. While any text will be formatted, the best result is for the BigQuery standard SQL. Goliath format query is the best option to take a complex query and make it more digestible for review and presentation. It reformats your BigQuery standard SQL queries, statements, and scripts into a consistent, beautified style, transforming it into a uniform syntax that makes it easy to maintain existing code as well as onboard new developers. But that is not all. Formatting a complex query is just the first step to understanding it. The query can be composed of multiple items, such as columns and tables in its many different forms. And formatting helps bring order to the structure, but the user needs additional tools to help identify and visualize the query components. For data lineage solution, you can look into third parties, but you'll find a lack of integration into the application and some associated costs. There are some existing internal features. So let's revisit our query. It's now been formatted, so the structure is better to see the components, but it's still not enough to tell us everything that's going on with it. We do have some color coding, which helps us, again, with the structure. So we see keywords such as select, from, where are colored, along with as. We have our comments color coded, so we get that breakdown. We also have the ability to fold it, so we can try to break down the query into bits, but there's still a lot going on here. For example, in the select, there's a lot of information and we're not really sure where this is coming from. So when we take a look at from, we see that we have a few different tables and we're able to navigate to the table in the nav by clicking on here. So there are some tools to do that, but you can see that there's, even in this table, there's a lot of information here and we're really not clear on what's being used in the select. Even if I navigate to other tables, it's hard to find everything together. So now I'm isolated at this table. And also at this table, I have to go scrolling to see the other tables. It's not all consolidated in one place. So I'm going to have to constantly be navigating to the tables to try to decipher what components are brought into this query. Frankly, the user wants something way more robust and easier to use. Introducing Query Explorer. It's a powerful feature that parses and analyzes your query. It breaks it down into its components and then allows you to interact with them to quickly identify how the query is composed. With Query Explorer, users can quickly do a variety of actions. They can consolidate query elements, obtain quick access to them in the navigator, view their data schema, tag columns and subqueries, visually present the components, and focus on columns in the query. Let's return to the query that we've been using and see how Query Explorer can help us. As long as we have a valid query, we can click Editor and select Query Explorer. This will analyze and parse our query and bring the elements into the navigator. You see that we have a node that's labeled after the same name as our tab, and the components of this are the elements that are made up in the query. For example, we have the 3 tables that are used, the 2 subqueries, and the output of the query. One of the first things we might want to do is isolate components for each of the tables. And we can do that by selecting the context menu item to tag columns. We can choose any color we want, and once we tag the column, it will color all of the columns associated to that table. So here we see that all of the RNA tables columns are color-coded red, so we can see throughout the query where these elements are used. So let's break down all the others and tag them. So we see here with the version semantic mutations where that's being used. And we could also tag and see where the clinical GDC is being used. So now we have a visual representation of the columns and their association by color to the tables that are their source. Now we could further tag what subqueries are being used. So we can see that this entire subquery is made of these components, and also it's made up of another subquery component. So we've fully tagged and color-coded all the elements and broken it down visually so you can see what each component is associated with. Another important feature is all of the elements, all of the tables are consolidated under this node. So I can quickly, I could expand individually, or on the parent, I can always expand everything. And so I can see bolded what columns from each of these tables are being used. So it's very easy for me to see what is being chosen from these tables. Now, if I want to isolate where this column is being used in the query, one thing I can do is click on it, and it will then highlight within the query where that column is being used. Another example. So I can quickly see, and it helps me navigate within the query the component. As mentioned on the parent, you can also untag everything. It's a quick way, if you don't want to individually select colors, to make tags to the entire query. Another benefit is now that I have all the components consolidated in the navigator, in addition to the features such as tag and untag, I have some common context menu items for the existing elements. So I can quickly preview the tables, I can query tables, I can script the DLL, show the schema. It makes it real easy for me to navigate and identify and explore the elements that make up this query. Query Explorer is powerful, but there are some limitations. It supports only valid standard SQL. Scripts, BigQuery external query, and connection are not supported. Tables need to be referenced in a specific format, and any changes to the query requires a refresh of the Query Explorer. Query Explorer is your new best friend. It changes the way you interact with complex queries by helping you in cases when a set of tables is not familiar to you, when you did not write the SQL statement and want to get a better understanding of it, when the SQL statement is too long and involves too many tables and joins and becomes too complex. And when you want to be able to discuss the statement with a colleague, it helps you visualize and identify the components easier. Both of these features, Format Query and Query Explorer, are currently available in Goliath.